Welcome, welcome. So I need to explain, we got to the end of the Rashis on Chaye Sarah, and the group has decided that what we should do is essentially what we do on Sunday mornings, which is to go through the Torah Temimah for the Torah. And what I'm going to do is continue with where we left off yesterday on the Torah Temimah on Parshat Bereshit. And so for this week, my plan is to go through simply with that first chapter of Genesis and in the Torah Temimah. So we're going to try. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Here we are with this. Unless you're speaking to mute, and only because I'm concerned about the interference. All right. So we did not get through all of Baruch Halevi Epstein's notes on what we had read. But what we had read yesterday was an interesting conversation with Alexander the Great with the sages of the Negev, where he asked various questions. And when he asked them about which was created first, the heavens or the earth, and they said the heavens were created first, and then he asked if the light was created before the darkness, etc., and they said this isn't something we can explain. And the Gemara in Tamid says, but they could have told him that the darkness was created first, because I'm looking at the Hebrew right now, right? Because it states quite explicitly in the Torah, it says there was darkness over the face of the deep, and after that it says, let there be light. So the question is, so why didn't they give him an answer? And because they were concerned that if they gave him that answer, he would go on to probe even more deeply into mystical elements of the Torah. And the problem with that is that unless you have background, it's so easy to misunderstand what's going on there, and they did not want to wind up having to do that. So let's take a look at, and we were in the middle of, or rather here we are, right? So where we left off yesterday. Ritzono lomar. So what is the Gemara telling us here when they said they didn't want to look into, let me just say, they said, basically the Gemara says, what is above and what is below. In other words, what preceded creation, as it were. Ritzono lomar, and what this is trying to tell us is besodot habriya, that is the secrets, the inner secrets of creation. And they didn't want to get into a whole discussion with him, right? But with regards to that first question he asked them, it means they answered that first question because they thought he just happened to ask them a question. It was just sort of something he was musing about, and he happened to ask them. It was just sort of incidental that he asked them. And then when he asked them the second question, they realized he was trying to unpack a lot, right? We got more to say here. And so here it explains, it says specifically here, that the darkness was created before the light. I mean, regardless of what they told him, Gemara is telling us the darkness was created before the light, and of course, referencing the scriptural verse. V'chein meforash mi pashtut haktuvim, and it's explained. It's explicit from the statements of the verses. Vahi erev, vahi voker. Not only that, it says there was evening and there was morning. Mikodem erev. First of all, night, and then day, right? So darkness before light. And this allows us to interpret and understand through this divrei hamidrash rabbakan, the words of the Midrash Rabbah. This is Bereshit Rabbah that he's talking about, this amazing collection of Midrashim on the 5 books of Moses and the 5 Megillot. Vayikra Elohim la'or yom, that Elohim, right, that God called the day light, or he called the light day. U'lechoshech kara laila, and the darkness he called night. And in looking at that verse carefully, we notice mi delo kativ u'lechoshech kara Elohim laila. Right, there could have been a complete parallel there. And the second time, when it has to do with the darkness, it doesn't mention God. It doesn't mention God. Melamed, and that teaches us she'ein hakadosh baruch hu meyached shmo al hara'ah. And it tells us that the Holy One, blessed be He, does not unite His name with wickedness. Klomar ala choshech, regarding darkness. Now, just as we're reading this, it's so interesting. Why is darkness associated with wickedness? And I'm wondering to myself, this is just one possibility, is that darkness and ignorance are considered very similar things. When you're in the dark, you don't know, and how darkness and wickedness really, truly can be associated. And we see people jumping to conclusions, or we all need to be careful of this, to jump to conclusions without having considered all the facts. And that this is wickedness indeed. And the idea of ignorance and wickedness being 2 sides of the same coin. Just a thought. But he says, in the terms of analyzing the analysis that we've just read here, he says, that's amazing. And this is regards to what the Midrash Rabbah is saying. Remember, he's saying this explanation he's given so far can shed light on the Midrash Rabbah, and he's quoting the Midrash Rabbah, right, which basically saying that God does not connect his name with wickedness, because it says God called the light day, God called the light day, and the night and the darkness he called night. And it doesn't mention God. It doesn't say, and God called the night, the darkness light. It doesn't say that, right? And he says, really, Sharei ein tzarich klal lechtov Elohim b'kriyat hachoshech. He says, but there isn't any need, right, to write the word God a second time, really, in terms of normal language. Kevan de Hashem Elohim dichtiv bekriyat haor, because the noun Elohim, right, the term Elohim, which is written with regards to what he called the light, ka'egam ala kriyat hachoshech. We understand that it refers also to what he called darkness. We know who else was calling the darkness night. It was God. I mean, that's the ukederech halashon ba'alma. That's normal usage. It's normal language. How you use language. Ach lefi hamavuar. But if we look into what we just explained, dechoshech nivra tchila. But if we're saying that darkness was in fact created to begin with laor, right? If it was created before the light, yesh lomar, then one can say kavanat hadrasha, that the intention of this interpretation, this drush, midalo kativ kaseda habriah, that it isn't written in the normal order of the actual creation of these things, vayikra Elohim lachoshech laila ulayom or. In other words, if we're looking at what was created, it should have said Elohim called the darkness night, and the day he called and he called the light day. Should have said that. And this, in fact, is what teaches us that the Holy One, blessed be He, does not associate his name, Shmo, al harasha, with wickedness. And for that reason, the order of this expression is changed around. Ve'ien b'midrash Rabbah, and he says, see further in the Midrash Rabbah, shebehechrech tzarich lefaresh leshono, that one is forced to explain his language, the language of the Mishnah, of the Midrash Rabbah, al derech shakatavnu, in the way in which we just wrote, kedei shelo yehe tamua kolkach, so that it isn't so surprising as to what the Midrash Rabbah is saying. All right, that is for that. So now we're on to verse 2. Yes, Golda.
Before we get off of darkness,
Yes.
We have that plague of darkness.
Yes.
Later on,
right,
which is also good and bad thing.
Yes.
But and the fact that you cannot envision darkness without light, and the same is reversed. So you need them both.
So I'm sorry I was interrupting you, but
That's okay.
Plague of darkness was the ninth plague. The ninth plague. It preceded the death of the firstborn. And I'm thinking now what your comment has raised in my mind the idea that another reason why darkness is evil is because darkness is also synonymous with death. And as it comes as the ninth plague, intimating the final plague of the death of the firstborn. And
yeah, but it also gave the opportunity to abscond with all sorts of nice things.
So that isn't okay.
That they would need later in the
yes. I understand. That is a reason. There's also another reason given, by the way, which is that the majority of Israelites were not worthy of the Exodus, and that they died during the plague of darkness. And God did not want the Egyptians to see how many Israelites were also killed in that point. And it allowed, I guess, and I may have this wrong, but it seems to me that perhaps the burials could take place at that time so that the Egyptians wouldn't have some kind of, excuse or criticism, or however you want to put it, against the Hebrews. Yeah, that's another.
I'm just thinking that's the other time of darkness that we ever used Choshech that I think of right now.
Well, and we also associate darkness, by the way, with intimacy, with a very high level of intimacy. Can be both good and can be unfortunate, hiding the truth. So, interesting to sort of take a look at this a little bit further. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm thinking of the fact that, people are even becoming violent and are doing it out of ignorance. Yes, David.
Yeah. So the one thing, though, that I guess my thought here is, but what about things like, we have nocturnal animals? I mean, they're not necessarily wicked.
No, right.
So, I mean, they thrive in the darkness, right? So we do have things that thrive in the darkness. So, that doesn't mean that, so that's the question I have about this is, it doesn't seem like necessarily the darkness itself is wicked, right? It may promote that, but it just, anyway, that's my question.
No, it's a good question. So I think, again, to me, this just reinforces the notion that we are looking at this from a very literary point of view, and not necessarily from a scientific point of view, right? There's nothing there's nothing, wicked. I'm trying to think of the right word, essentially wicked, or, about nocturnal animals. But for human beings, the night, we have many associations of the night that have negative associations. And that's why I was trying to lift the darkness from physical darkness into mental darkness or other things where darkness can cover up wickedness.
Hmm.
To that extent, we say that darkness is associated with wickedness, but it's not to suggest by any means that nocturnal animals are essentially wicked. I would not get that.
Yeah, and that was just one example, but okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I think it's important to clarify it, and I'm glad you raised it. I think that was, I mean, that's something I think other people might think too, right? So going on, these are in some ways, difficult verses. They do sort of border on mysticism. By the way, another comment on the Alexander, what is above and what is below. So it certainly has occurred to me as I've meditated more about the issues of immortality, that we don't know where we came from, right? We can't explain how we became conscious human beings. There isn't a way in which to explain our ability to achieve consciousness. So, in other words, you could, in a way, parallel to say that what is above has to do with the reality that brought us into this reality, and below might be the reality that is inevitably involved in our fate as we come to the end of our lives. That we just don't know, that and it's possible that the mystical tradition has tried to explore that deeply and try to understand it, come to some level of understanding. And I confess that I am by no means any expert whatsoever when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's a challenge enough for me to try to understand what we're studying right now. But just the terms above and below could refer to that element of life that we all are familiar with. So, v'ha'aretz hayta, and the earth was. Mikdi b'shamayim adchil, bereisha, he says, since he began, right? The Torah began with the heavens, right? My tama chashiv maase aretz tchila. Why then does the Torah, look at how it's analyzing so carefully and pulling apart and deconstructing, right? Saying, why does the Torah mention the land first if heavens came first? Right? Why is it discussing that? What the goings on of the earth? Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael. It was taught in the school of Rabbi Yishmael. Mashal lamelech. We can compare this to a king. She'amar la'avadav, who told his servants, Hashkimu lefitchi, get up early, arise early to the entrance, to my entrance. Hishkim umatza nashim v'anashim. He got up, I believe, right? The king got up and he found women and men. Lemi mishabeach. So who is he going to praise? In other words, who is the one who's more praiseworthy? Lemi she'en darcho lashkim v'ishkim. So he's going to consider more praiseworthy the ones who are not normally going to get up early, and in fact got up early. So pulling this together exactly, I understand the general, in other words, it's saying that either the women or the men it would not be their custom to get up early. So I right now I have a hard time answering that question. I can't say. It's quite possible that the women got up earlier, right, to take care of the babies and to get the house going and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. Is it that the men are more praiseworthy here? Is it that the women are more praiseworthy? I can't answer that question. Because for me, there are two reasons. I mean, and maybe the men got up earlier, especially if they were farmers, or maybe they got up to study really early. I don't know. Can't answer that. I know what goes on in my family, but, I think all families are different. So anyway, but I get the point, right? That when you see somebody who is going over and above their normal behavior, right? So, Okay, enough of that. Let's keep going on the. Okay. Let me make sure I find that. Okay. Yep. Let's see what footnote we have. So Tet Zion, we're on footnote 16. Let's find it. Here we are. Tet Zion. Lo nitba'er tam mashal zeh. It's not so clear what the point of this mashal, this parable. V'yein bepiresh Rashi. So we need to examine Rashi on the Gemara, right? She'eino mevu'ar kochach, and even the explanation of Rashi isn't so clear. Okay, excuse me. Uveture Even, and this book called Ture Even, Hiksha Alav, the author of the Ture Even, raised a difficulty on Rashi. Upiresh Pirush Acher, and he goes ahead and gives a different explanation than Rashi. Aval Perusho Dachuk, according to the Torah Temimah, he says, but his explanation is forced. Kafi sheyitpa'er lahamayin, as will become clear to someone who actually looks at his interpretation. He says, but for me it seems to hakavana, that the intention of this parable, mishum dehashamayim bichlal, okay, hem krovim b'ma'ala lema'alat gedolat hakadosh baruch hu, and he says that it is because when it comes to the heaven, they would be understood in general to be close to the ma'ala, the worthiness, right? La ma'alat gedolah. In other words, their association, we would associate greatness with the heavens. La ma'alat gedolat hakadosh baruch hu, right? That heavens would be closer to the worth of the Holy One, blessed be He. In other words, they would be a holier place, mikirvat haaretz, from the closeness of the land. In other words, we speak about the heavens as this spiritual, right? They tend to express spirituality and holiness and things more than earth. I mean, we talk about physicality or materialism and things like that. Okay. Ya'an ki hashamayim he machon l'shivto. The reason for this, he says, is because the heavens are the habitation. They are the habitation of the divine. Ukvodo, and his honor, right? Uveruav hem ruchanim, and their creation is spiritual. Uvilti nitpasim. Now, I'm not sure what nitpasim means. I would have to look and see what this means. All right, I really don't know. I'd have to see. Tafus means caught, right? So I'm not sure how this word is being used. Ruchanim, spiritual, right? Ve'umashe kain haaretz. This does not apply to the land. Shehi kula chomer v'geshem, because the earth is completely physical. It's made out of physical and shape. So maybe nitpasim means that it's it's not something that takes on a physical form, something like that. Ukemoshe katav hashamayim shamayim lahashem. And not only that, we have a verse that says, the heavens are the heavens of the Lord. Haaretz natan livnei adam, but the land he gave, the earth he gave to human beings. Kavana, and the intention of that verse is shashamayim ruchanim, haaretz gashmit. The point of that is what we've been saying. That is that the heavens are spiritual, but the land is material. The imkain, and if this is the case, mehara'ui haya, it would have made more sense, it would have made total more sense, shahashamayim yashkimu maher meha'aretz, that the heavens would get up earlier than the earth, l'kriyat hakadosh baruch hu, for the calling out of the Holy One, blessed be He. Uvechol zeh, and nevertheless, kadma gam haaretz, the earth it also received the call at the same time as the heavens. And now this parable is starting to make sense. That is, the men and the women also all received the summons of the king. But it would have been more difficult, let's us say, for, I got a feeling, my prejudice is showing, for the women to get there early because of all their responsibilities at home, right? And for this reason, the scripture mentions the actions of the earth first. And according to this, the parable is settled, it makes sense. Lahanimshal, it can be compared to what it is a parallel to, the Tam Usvara. It makes just a whole bunch of sense now. It's rational and logical and all like that. And we will stop here for today. Okay. So we're on to...
that would be from a man's point of view, because the women have been up for hours already.
Well,
exactly. But, and they could probably, I got to work, after taking care of babies, dropping them off and getting to work on time. So,
Well, okay. Right. I understand, but I have to say, and of course, here I am trying to give credit to the women, right? And you're taking it away from me. But no, it's not necessarily that the women got up earlier. It's just that they would show up. It wouldn't be for the women to gather at the king's palace. Okay, that's my sense.
That wouldn't be normal for them to do.
It wouldn't be.
Is what I'm thinking.
Correct. And I think that's the intent of the parable, right? That he was so delighted that the women were willing to do this, even though it would not have been the normal thing for them to do. So, and when it says lahashkim, that is to get up early, which is the normal meaning of it, he meant showing up. He meant showing up. So
okay.
More normal.
I need you here at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Sort of,
Right. Yep. And he was expecting the men to show up. He wasn't expecting us to show up. And here the women showed up. It was amazing. He was thrilled. So of course he mentioned them. Okay. We will stop the recording with this. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.